Hi guys! Excuse the hair and the bulky sweater. I just woke up, but I was feeling kind of inspired to make a video, and I don't know exactly what it's going to be about. I mean, I know what it's going to be about, I just don't know exactly how that's going to happen and what it's going to sound like coming out of my mouth. So it might be a little bit disjointed and might not make a lot of sense, but what else is new, right? None of my videos really make all that much sense. So anyway, I was thinking the other day I got a text message from my mom, and she's been working on this project, getting really into decorating pots. She's getting very artistic. I got her a subscription to Taproot magazines, but if you guys haven't seen yet or heard about or subscribed to, you guys should totally check it out, because it isn't necessarily witchy or pagan in any way, but it is very earth-based. It talks about farming and crafts and crochet and recipes. It's very hearthy, if that makes sense. I feel like Hestia would totally get a kick out of this magazine, so if that resonates with you at all, check it out. Phoebe Wall actually does the art for the cover, and she's on Tumblr, and her art is just very wholesome and comforting to look at. And everything about this magazine just sort of screamed my mother. And I got a subscription to her, or for her birthday last year. And it seems like she's been pretty inspired by it. She recently got one, and the cover of it, the art on there, inspired her to start being more creative and getting her hands into some messy art stuff. So she's been decorating pots, which is directly related to her interest in gardening. And like I said, she sent me this text message and had a picture of what she was working on, and she's currently painting little tile-like scraps of paper with different nature things like butterflies and suns and stuff like that. And she's gonna paste it onto a pot that she has for a plant that's coming. And there was just something about it, like when I looked at it, there was something about it that, I mean, I know that you can't directly, like, you can't distill these grand concepts of, like, paganism and witchiness down to, like, nature or down to specific images, but because, I mean, it's so broad, like I said, and there's so many different people who follow this path and who have different ideas about it. But there was just something about this image that she sent me, and something about her, where I thought, she has a witch soul. And I think that this is something, I'm kind of getting off course here, but I think that this is, I'll get back onto course, maybe, hopefully. But I think that this is something that is interesting to me, because I know that there's a lot of people who worry about not being hereditary witches, who worry as if they're, like, making it up, as if there was no precedent for it, or whatever. But I wonder, how true that is. I think, when I imagine my mom, and my mom's a very religious person. She's a Baptist, but she doesn't go to church. She's kind of like that holiday Christian, and it's because she's just a very solitary person. She doesn't necessarily like to interact with people. Her least favorite thing in the world is, like, shaking hands, and you always have to do that when you go to church. There's always that moment where you have to stand up and shake everyone's sweaty palms, and she doesn't like that. And so she is very internal and solitary, I think, about her relationship with God, and it seems to me that there's so much about her spiritual practice that resonates with a lot of other people's spiritual practice in relation to paganism and witchcraft. The solitariness, the eclecticness of finding God within nature, of finding God within art, the individuality of that spirituality, if that makes sense. And so I think there's something about her that is very witchy to me. And I don't want to put words into her mouth or say that she feels a certain way, because, I mean, she's my mom, but I don't really know how she feels or how she thinks about God or nature or any of these big concepts. But there's something about it, like I said, that just when I saw that image, when I saw what she's doing and how she relates to things like nature and gardening and stuff like that, it just resonated with me and how I feel about those things, even though we come at it in kind of a different perspective. She comes at it from a Christian perspective, and I come at it from a more pagan perspective. But maybe it's just me and my biases towards Christianity, but I don't necessarily think that Christianity is so conducive to that kind of mindset, and I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. There's certain things about Christianity that people who are more into this idea of community, of evangelism, of reaching out towards other people, those types of people I think would find those aspects of Christianity very attractive. But then there are other people who are more like my mom, who are more like me, who are more like a lot of people who are pagans or witches. Not necessarily for all people who are pagans or witches, but a lot of them, I would say. A lot of these solitary practitioners, a lot of these eclectic witches, I think a lot of them would shy away from that overwhelming amount of almost forced community that I think a lot of churches and in general the religion of Christianity kind of not necessarily forces on people, but encourages in its people. And so I wonder if my mom hadn't been raised in this Christian faith, and if she wasn't already so set in her ways. She's 60. She's a 60-year-old woman. She's already lived a lot of her life, and for the most part has figured out what she thinks works for her. And I'm sure a lot of these things that she thinks works for her actually do work for her. But I wonder if there aren't other things that would work better for her, that would be more aligned with how she views God, for example, which is what I'm talking about here. And so I wonder if she wasn't already Christian, if she hadn't already been raised in the Christian faith, hadn't already, I guess, immersed herself in that faith for so long, if she were to come to this idea of witchiness, of paganism, from a perspective that wasn't already biased with Christian dogma, if she wouldn't embrace that and consider that something as inherent within herself. So that's like one aspect of what I wanted to talk about. That there's a part of me that feels like my mom has a really witchy soul without even realizing it. And then another thing that got me thinking was, how many of these people with these witchy souls do we actually have in our family, maybe even closer than we think? Ember Honeyraven recently made a video about, I think it was in her toxic relationships. It might not have been. One of her recent videos, and she talked about how one of her family members, a cousin, actually discovered her on YouTube, which is hilarious because it wasn't like necessarily a negative thing at all, but her cousin, without Ember even realizing it, was actually interested. Sorry for shaking you guys up there, but without even realizing it, was actually really into paganism and witchiness and all that stuff, and so actually discovered her that way through YouTube by searching. And of course, Ember is like the matriarch of the YouTube witchy community, and popped up right away. And so that's just an example of once again finding someone in your family that has that kind of mindset, that kind of soul set, if you will, that's similar to yourself, without you even realizing it. And I've just been thinking a lot about ancestors lately, and hereditary witches and things like that. I think if you are someone who can call yourself a hereditary witch and like pinpoint exactly which individuals in your family have that kind of belief system and follow that kind of practice, that's so cool. I wish I could do that as well. But I don't necessarily think that just because you can't do that necessarily means that you don't have some sort of precedence in your ancestry to, I don't want to say legitimize your practice, but kind of connect you to that generational line, which is always, I think, very, very powerful. If not in like an actual magical sense, then in a mental sense, in a kind of grounding sense, if that makes sense. I'm using the word sense a lot. But I think that sometimes you can feel a little bit lonely sitting here. A lot of us are, kind of subtracted from our families in a lot of ways, because in the West, I think a lot of us have been raised in that Christian faith. There's very few of us who have been raised to be thoughtful about our religion. Most of us, I think, have been raised to think only one thing about our religion, which is generally Christianity. Certainly people have experienced differently, but I think for the most part here in the United States especially, most of us come from this kind of background. And so sitting here, lighting your candles, lighting your incense, counting the beads on a prayer necklace. That's not the right word for it. I don't know why I left my head, but you guys get what I'm saying. Doing all these things like spells and meditation, it can get a little bit lonely because you don't have that familial support always that you can kind of go to and talk about your burgeoning, changing, developing belief system. But if you can find examples of that within your ancestry, even in the smallest ways, such as seeing in your parents the things that originally attracted you to this path, I think that can be very powerful and connecting, And I think that even if you can't do that with like your most recent people, I think that this drive to be a part of this spiritual practice necessarily stems from somewhere. It could be 10 years in the past, it can be 100, 200, 1,000. But I think somewhere, at some point, you had someone in your family that had this inherent interest in the beyond and connecting. It could be as far away as when shamanism was the most prevalent example of I don't even know what to call it, of this idea of like church service, if that makes sense, of like going to a shaman and trying to piece through what they're saying, their visions, their concepts of divinity. That was like the main form of connecting to one's spirituality, to one's god or goddess. Even if it's as far back as that is something that has carried down through the long line of generations to yourself. And maybe it's taken all this time for it to really resonate with someone. I don't know. But I think about, as you guys all know, because I posted a lot of videos about it, I am very, very gay. And for the longest time, it seemed like something that was separate from my family, something that was like an outlier, something that was unique, like an anomaly. But then as I got older, and I started listening to stories about my mom's childhood, and she started talking about this aunt of mine named Aunt Mars. And this lady she just seemed super cool. She was like so hip back in the 50s. She was an artist essentially. I wonder if she wrote poetry. That would be so cool to find out. I wish I knew her. I never had a chance to meet her. But she used to take pictures. Like she was like the family photographer, and I saw a lot of her pictures, and they were very artistic and cool, and of course vintage. And everyone had their like cat eye sunglasses and coiffed hair and everything. But she lived in a very chic apartment in California, and she taught English, I think, at either a high school or a university or college or something like that. But she had this friend who lived with her who was a girl, and she played golf, which doesn't necessarily say anything about her sexuality, which is what I'm getting at. But there were all these rumors about her, and the kind of rumors where it's like no longer a rumor, but just truth, and no one really wants to talk about it. My mom and my aunt both are pretty adamant about what their aunt's sexuality was, which was she was a lesbian. She just was. She never got married. She never had kids. She lived with this woman for several decades until she died. So yeah, and like hearing about this, and like I said, it's not like set in stone. You know, we don't know it for certain, but we're pretty certain that that was what was going on. Everything just seems to add up, and you know, make it seem as though that was the case. And I'd like to believe that it is, because I like to think about her and what she went through during that time, which is so different from now. You know, now we still have difficulties in you know, certain oppressions that we go through. We still have difficulties with hate crimes, and with the way that our government treats us, with the way that people treat us, our family treats us, society treats us. Back then it was even worse. And so to think about what she was going through, and that she was powerful enough and empowered enough to look at the way that the world was working and decide, well, that's not how I want to live my life, and I don't care what they think. I'm going to be with the person that I love, going to live with them and share my life with them. It's something that's so powerful to me and gives me strength facing situations that are not good, but not as bad as what she faced. You know, if she could do it, then I can do it. Her blood is in my blood. So, I mean, it was kind of a tangent, but if you guys get what I'm saying from talking about that story, there can be something so powerful about knowing who your ancestors were, knowing that they were somehow connected to the things that you're going through, even in the most minute ways. Even if you have to really look for it, there has to be some precedence there for who you are, what you're going through, what your beliefs are. It's something that's deeper than you. You know, it's something that is rooted to the earth, to your ancestry, to the beginning of time. That's what we're all, I think, going back to in a way with our spirituality, with all of this that we're doing, with chasing after the goddess. It's all trying to go back to the beginning of time and understanding the precedence of it all, you know? So hopefully that made sense to you guys. It's all up there in my head. It's just rambling around, and I had to get it out and talk to you guys about it. And hopefully you guys get what I'm saying, and if you guys do and you guys have some thoughts about this, I would love to hear them. So yeah, thank you guys for listening to me. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you guys later.